Hello and welcome to our special elections show, The Last Word. My name is Justice Malala, and it's so good to be here and to share this special time when the nation decides who should lead and who should step back. Over the next 10 days, we'll speak to the main players in these elections, and we'll get to hear from them and from you how we make our wonderful country a better place. Today, the 25th of October, with just 6 days to go before the election, we heard from Eskom at 5:30 p.m. that load shedding will start at 6 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. This meant that the country had a mere 30 minutes to prepare for the blackouts before they started. Students preparing for their final exams, parents cooking dinner, workers on their way home. They all had to scuttle to make alternative plans tonight. When it's raining and cold in Johannesburg, as someone said on the campaign trail last week, they are playing with us. In the meantime, President Cyril Ramaphosa was in energetic mode today as he visited various parts of Joburg, where he told residents that, and I quote him, "We can only resolve the electricity crisis by working together towards preserving our infrastructure." In the Western Cape, the Freedom Front Plus and the movement that wants to secede from South Africa, the Cape Exit movement, formally joined forces to work towards an independent Western Cape. I wonder what the people of Khayelitsha and Mitchell's Plain have to say about that. Do they also want to leave South Africa, really? Our guest today is ANC Treasurer General Paul Mashatile. After my conversation with him, we'll give you a thumbs up and thumbs down on the events of the day. But first, election analyst Wayne Sussman says that the two biggest parties are even more vulnerable than they were in the 2019 elections. Wayne Sussman will be joining this show and others here on ENCA for the next week to analyze the ups and downs as we look forward to November 1 and beyond. Wayne, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you here. I want to ask you about trends and where this thing is going. What are the main things? In 2016, I looked out for, is Jacob Zuma popular and so forth. I looked out for corruption, service delivery. What are the three main issues and the three main trends I must look out for in these elections?
So when one looks at elections, we must always, as you've done correctly, look at what happened the last time. So in 2016, the president of the ANC and the president of the country was deeply unpopular. And there were very few competitors in the space. There was the DA and the EFF, essentially, and to a lesser extent, the IFP in northern KwaZulu-Natal. So in this less competitive space, the Democratic Alliance and the EFF were able to overperform, and the DA got 27% of the vote nationwide. The EFF got their best ever percentage, and the IFP recovered.
Was it overperformance, though? We'll come back to your point. Was it overperformance when, with a leader who had been found not guilty, but had been accused and was carrying so much baggage at that point that they couldn't really unseat the ANC in major parts of the country? They managed to get close here in Johannesburg and Tshwane and so forth, but not really that close.
Well, it was unprecedented. It was unprecedented for the fact that for the first time beyond the city of Cape Town, the ANC fell below 50% in all three Gauteng metros. Of course, they hold on to the key metro of Ekurhuleni, and they fell below 50% in Nelson Mandela Bay. So in that respect, it was an unprecedented election, and the DA had the best ever performance by an opposition party since 1994. So as we approach this election, what's unique, and you said so at the start of your intro, it's not just the ruling party, the ANC, the governing party, which is vulnerable, but the official opposition also, the Democratic Alliance. And you spoke about Eskom. That's an albatross hanging over the ANC's neck in the last stretch of the campaign. And of course, the DA's self-inflicted wounds are the albatross over its neck as it comes into the last week of this campaign. But what's going to be very, very interesting, we might have national trends and we might see what's trending on Twitter and on social media. But I wonder whether in many parts of our country, the prevailing national winds aren't going to reach those areas, and there are going to be interesting trends and nuances in some of the areas and regions of our country and land.
Cyril Ramaphosa seems to be putting in a lot of miles So is John Steenhuisen. He was in Johannesburg this weekend. Julius Malema has, and I think you've written this, has traveled probably far more than anyone else in this election. Are the figureheads at the top of these parties as important as the local candidate who is standing up in my neighborhood, your neighborhood, and so forth?
That's a great question. Let's start with the ANC. So President Ramaphosa has been the face of that campaign. Remember, the ANC doesn't announce mayoral candidates. And so while with other parties, if I think of Good or the DA, you'll know who their mayoral candidates are. Action SA, we don't know who the ANC's mayoral candidates are. So that's even more important that Cyril Ramaphosa is the face of their campaign. And he was in Orange Farm today, the heartland of ANC support in the city of Johannesburg. You're seeing John Steenhuisen trying to build a brand, trying to establish himself as a credible leader of the opposition. And you're seeing Julius Malema yesterday in Umtata picking up the coveted endorsement of King Dalindyebo. And he was in 2 metros today. So they see themselves, and I'm sure the opinion polls in their own internal polls will say that all 3 party leaders are absolutely key and instrumental in getting votes for the party. And that's why we're seeing less and less ward candidate posters, less and less information about the mayoral candidates, and more information about people who are not even going to be on the ballot paper in 6 days' time.
You alluded to this at the beginning. Lots of small parties. I mean, you know, you have all kinds. Party of Action. You have DOP. You have all kinds, and then you have the independents. What impact post the election, if they do relatively okay? What impact do they have on governance, and what impact do they have on the big players if they, you know, lose some support in these elections?
Well, that's key. So when one looks, we've had experience with coalitions of small local parties in places like Prince Albert in the Western Cape. There's a place in Ladysmith, Kanaland, where there's a party called ICOSA. We're going to see more and more of these local parties become kingmakers, I believe, after this election. And they're going to spread from the Western Cape and the Northern Cape to other parts of the country. And it shows that, on the one hand, people are saying the big 3 national parties do not have solutions to our local and specific problems. We want local parties or regional parties to tackle those problems. Now, the key thing for these local parties is it's one thing to do well in an election. The other thing is to govern effectively, because it's going to probably be in a coalition, and bring real change to those people's lives. We've already seen some of those kingmakers from the last election, some parties in the Northern Cape who did very, very well, who've totally disappeared because there was so much infighting. So it's one thing doing well in a single election. It's one thing coming into government in a local municipality. It's another thing doing a good job and keeping afloat.
You've used an expression, I liked it, an October surprise. And that expression was that will a scandal come up this week, and a scandal that derails everything and changes the dynamic. But would that really happen? Aren't we still voting largely with our hearts, and then for the rest we've made up our minds already for the next 6-7 days?
Well, you're trying to do 2 things at the last minute, and the October surprise can derail both. On the one hand, you're trying to firm up your base to make sure that the people and supporters who voted for you faithfully and loyally in the last few elections come out enthused and energetic on election day. The second thing is there's a tiny slither. But in this election, if you've seen some of the opinion polls in our metros, where none of the major parties are likely to get an outright majority, bar for Buffalo City in East London and Cape Town, those 1 or 2% of undecided voters are absolutely critical right now. So you're going to try do everything in your power to get them onto your side. And the way some major parties are going, they're going to try to do everything in their power to make sure those floating voters don't come to them because they're trying to turn them off. They're not doing a very good job. I mean, campaigns are very stressful, so gaffes, it's understandable to make gaffes. Are we going to see major gaffes in the last week here?
Wayne Sussman, I'm looking out for an October surprise. Thanks so much for coming through. After the break, ANC Top 6 member Paul Mashatile joins us.